Indiana Jones, It's a podcast about Indiana Jones. Every movie, 1 minute at a time. Indiana Jones Minute.
Welcome back to the Indiana Jones Minute, the podcast in which we get to the heart of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom 1 minute at a time. I'm Tom Taylor.
I'm Pete Mummert.
I'm Jerry Porter.
And I'm John Brueggen.
Welcome back, John.
Thank you. Great to be back.
Back in the jungle to close out the week with us. This is fantastic. I hope we all survive. Minute 35 begins with Indy showing Willie the scrap he got from Wheezy Jefferson and ends with Willie saying that she's safer sleeping with a snake. And just to confuse everything, we were saying yesterday that maybe this movie was starting to make sense. Everything goes crazy when Indiana Jones says Sankara. He actually says Sankara instead of Shankara this time. So I don't know what to believe anymore.
Well, that was my note too, actually. It was. He says at second 4, he says Sankara.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We were ripping on him that maybe everybody was upset at him. He kept adding these H's to everything.
Yeah.
Maybe he learned.
I'm completely untethered now.
Maybe it's part of the dream. Leia and Leah were pronounced differently quite a bit throughout Star Wars.
Han and Han.
Yeah. I like it. So yeah, he gives her this piece of, he says it's a piece from an old manuscript, and she grabs it from him. He's like, gentle, which is something he's never thought about before in relation to any
Easy with that Anubis.
archaeological artifact. Yeah. But then he explains what's on it. And he says it's Sanskrit. It's part of the legend of Sankara. Here he does without the H. Yeah. And he says he climbs Mount Kalisa where he meets Shiva, the Hindu god. And about half of this is real and about half of this is made up. So like we talked about, Shiva, the kind of one of the high gods in the Hindu trinity, lives on Mount Kalisa or Mount Kailash in the Himalayas. So that part's true, and that's where they get the linga, the Shiva linga stones. Is they say it's like a representation of Shiva's dwelling place in the Himalayas, which is they consider the center of the universe. So that part is real, but then the made up part is that this priest Sankara went and met Shiva, and Shiva gave him these magic rocks to kind of protect everything.
Huh.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was you said that that's not Shiva in the picture, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually Krishna, and you can tell that because Krishna is always blue and wears a crown, like in the picture, whereas Shiva is always represented with a third eye, and instead of a crown, he has a crescent moon over his head.
Huh.
Is there anything about those stones being phallic in the history?
That's actually hotly debated.
Yeah.
Whether Shiva linga are phallic or not. Like, some people say absolutely, some people say no, that's offensive. And it kind of goes back and forth, I think.
Are they Yannick at all?
Are they Yannick? I was just trying to read a Russian novel that it was translated on Google to English for me, and so it's horribly hard to get through the novel as a whole, but it's an Indiana Jones Russian novel. Wow. And the guy just he took all 3 movies and mixed them up, and at some point he keeps referring to these stones as being a phallic symbol and part of some sort of phallic cult, and I had never heard that prior to reading that book.
Well, they are. Weird. And actually, if you go into an Indian temple or a shrine where you see the lingam stones in like their actual locations, they're often located next to a yonic like stone, like they sit upon it. Mm-hmm. So it is, which is what has led a lot of people to say that they actually are phallic symbols.
Huh. Now I was listening to this story and thinking, if Shiva gave Sankara 5 rocks to quote go forth and combat evil, that's a straightforward directive. So whoever has these stones better keep that in mind, or otherwise, we're going to have one of these Yahweh Nazi conflict meltathons.
Right.
And I keep thinking about this, especially with Raiders and now this Temple of Doom starting to take shape. The deities come down to earth and bequeath a sacred object to specific people, either Moses or now Sankara. And whenever else somebody tries, starts wielding it with their grubby mitts, things start melting,
Yeah.
Whenever you get the proverbial Shishak or Hitler and the Nazis, it's kind of like they're not familiar with the original story, and just because they want it doesn't mean everything's gonna turn out fine. It's kind of just like real life.
Yeah, but you got to think this one of these rocks, assuming it's actually a Sankara stone, was just like hanging out at this village. And did they know what it is, and are they using it to go forth and battle evil? I mean, is their God going to have a problem with that, the way they're handling it?
Well, why did the kid bring back the parchment in the first place?
Maybe he's the first one to figure out that the rocks are actually Sankara stones or something. And he's like, fortune and glory, I'm going to be rich.
Well, the only thing that, we just know, the only thing we know about that parchment is that Indy later on matches it up to a tunnel, like a painting on a tunnel. Is that the only thing that it serves? Is that the only purpose? Like, why does the kid have the parchment? Or is that to show him this is where we are? I guess maybe that's telling him, look, we're all being, chained up in Pankot Palace.
But since that's probably not going to be enough for you, there also might be some famous Sankara stones here.
Yeah.
Or couldn't he come back to the village and go, Mom, everybody's in Pankot Palace?
Right.
Why does he need the parchment? Yeah.
Gather up a posse.
Yeah. Why does he need the parchment here?
That was just a piece of one of the guards' robes that he ripped off as he was escaping.
Right.
Yeah, see, I think the kid came back and he's like, if Sankara stones are all you love, then that's what you'll receive.
Suffering kids isn't enough. Here, Sankara.
I know what I'm doing.
Well, I love in this scene how the elephant just keeps pounding Willie in the back of the head, just bam, bam, and it's clear that at least some of those shots from behind her, that's a fake elephant trunk that they use to just kind of pound her and make the point. Because I don't know how many times you can ask an elephant to hit somebody in the head before it starts feeling bad about it. But
she seems like a nice lady.
I gotta say, Jerry, I'm very proud of you. You did me proud looking up the elephants and figuring out these are actually Asian elephants and the differences between Asian and African elephants. They are different, and their tusks are usually larger on the African elephants. But this male that Indy is riding has this giant set of tusks. I mean, they're almost like a set of woolly mammoth tusks coming off of there. And it turns out those are prosthetic tusks. So this elephant had some tusks, and then they mounted these other long pieces on there to make them look more impressive.
Extensions.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's like you can find those on the back page of the LA Weekly. Mail away.
Would that be uncomfortable for an elephant to wear those?
I don't think so. They're so strong, and that with in India especially, they grow up with these elephants and they use them for manual labor all the time. So if they got to go move a tree, they just get on the elephant and ask it to do it. And they use those tusks for that. So it's capable of carrying many, many hundreds of pounds. And I don't think the tusk probably bothered it. Maybe it gave him some self-esteem boost. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Tusk not big enough? Back page of the LA Weekly.
So Willie goes into this this story about her grandpa. Is it her grandpa or her uncle? I forget.
Grandpa. My
Yeah,
grandpa was a
grandpa.
magician. Yeah.
Like, she's scoffing at Indy's story about magic stones and stuff, and she says her grandpa was a magician, and he entertained kids, and he had rabbits up his sleeve and stuff like that, and died a very poor man. And I always took this story at face value, like, okay, I'm scoffing at magic, but it actually doesn't make a lick of sense. And it actually bothers me, because he's like, it's not like her grandfather thought he was doing magic and believed in magic, and then when he failed to master necromancy or something, he died penniless. Like, he knew it was tricks. He was an entertainer. He was entertaining little kids. So, like, this story really doesn't have anything to do with, like, the magic rock story that she just heard.
No, it's really clunky and weird.
But it does kind of turn. This is very similar to how Indy talks to Marcus in Raiders. Like how Indy sort of becomes the cynic, and he sort of starts telling stories like this, like, magic. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, but it's not like, but she's saying, like, a guy who knew he wasn't doing magic didn't make a lot of money and died. Like, it doesn't have it. It's not even saying, like, I don't believe in magic. It's saying, like, I don't think people can make a good living trying to entertain kids at parties with magic tricks, like tricks.
Well, I think that the actual quote is, he made a lot of children happy and died a very poor man. Yeah. And so I was thinking a couple things. Number one, wow, Willie stayed in entertainment. Just like her grandfather. Like, oh, she didn't, I don't know, become an auto mechanic or a biologist or something. I mean, she stayed in entertainment. But I wondered if this was to give us insight as to why Willie is overly materialistic. Like, she grew up poor. I don't know, maybe because she grew up poor, and if you don't have money, you're a failure? I mean, is that the story? I mean, because if you said that sentence, you know, you made a lot of children happy in your life, you'd kind of be like, well, that's wonderful. That's all. Who is that? Your grandfather?
Right.
He sounds like a great guy.
I think it's a warning to Indy, because Indy is on his way to make a lot of children very happy and to get rich. And she's saying, well, the experience I have is if you make a lot of children very happy, you're not going to get rich. You're going to die a very poor man, whatever, fortune and glory. So I think she's saying you can't have it all. Like, you're going to go save the kids. You're not getting anything out of it.
It's weird because, Jerry, as you were saying that, I was starting to think, oh, I guess maybe it does work as a way to, like, kind of get an insight into her. Like, yeah, she grew up poor, so she's got, like, this thing about poverty and stuff, and so she's mad at the idea of magic because it left her poor or something. But then she throws in that he made a lot of kids happy, and that's, like, part of her bitterness. That's really was
yeah. No, I mean, it makes no sense, especially if you are going to save a mind filled with destitute children.
yeah.
And then let's say they do save them at the end, and then are we supposed to be like, and by the way, if Indy he doesn't get the stones, or if he doesn't sell the stones for money, then is it a sad ending according to Willie? Like, is Indy just going to be like her grandpa?
Yeah, unless he stuffs that bat under his hat and uses it as a trick, as a magic trick.
I mean, because he will have made a lot of children happy, and if he doesn't sell the stone, he's, quote, going to be a very poor man. Or does it only count because if he brings the children back to the village, then he would also make a lot of adults happy?
But see, I'm not sure I buy into the fact that she's saying this is all bad. Like, I don't know if she necessarily thinks what happened to her grandfather was bad. I think she's just reacting to the fortune and glory line, because she says magic rocks, fortune and glory. Like, she kind of mocks him for saying fortune and glory. I think she's just saying, dude, there's nothing about this situation that has anything to do with fortune and glory.
Well, first of all, she never even heard him say fortune and glory. He said that to Shorty at the top of that mountain or whatever.
It's true.
That hill. And she says it more than anybody now. She said it twice. Shorty has said it once. Indy has said it once.
So
and
maybe
still,
she
I
made
said
it
this
up.
yesterday. There's nothing about Indy. He's just explaining this story and like, oh, I might find this stone. He's not like his gold lust isn't hulking out or anything, and he's not going to go like, knock kids out of his way to get to the stones or anything like that.
I smell Burger King.
Yeah, Burger
It's just
King
weird.
T-shirts. You
Yeah.
know,
That's a sign of
grasping
a
at
stroke,
straws.
Jerry.
No,
Smell fresh baked bread.
the whole thing is really weird. I don't know. It's
is.
really strange because for her she's going magic rocks, and you're like, actually these are religious. If we're
Yeah.
gonna keep in the spirit and the theme of the movie and the shaman and Shiva and we're going on this journey here, and Shiva brought him from the sky. It's actually religious, in the same way the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, would you call the Ark of the Covenant a magic box?
Well, Indy sort of does. I mean, that's kind of his attitude at the beginning.
Well, and if you start looking at him in Raiders a year from now, it's like the fortune and glory stuck in his head. He's raiding tombs for golden statues, and he's going after the Ark of the Covenant. That's much more fortune and glory than what we're doing here.
Yeah,
Exactly.
And they
Yes.
managed to get it across without saying fortune and glory every 5 minutes.
Yeah. And they still had Burger King combos. It was fine.
They were delicious.
I just think it means he learned that saving kids doesn't pay.
Right. That's
why-
to buy a
that's why
plane
he-
ticket to
yeah.
Delhi after all that.
So he's going to ditch short round and go for the treasure.
Yeah. I was gonna say, what the hell's Short Round doing there?
Well, that's why short round isn't around for very long.
I want them to cut to Shorty after she says that. He's like, oh. Just kind of hangs his head. My happiness is not
Made
important.
a lot of children happy and died a very poor man.
This is
That's-
on you, Shorty.
Yeah, that's the only thing I thought of was like she's just. It's going to show you everything she does is based on money
Yeah.
and materialistic things. Materialism. I guess.
Right.
I guess that's why they put that in there. I don't know.
She had to say something, I guess.
Yeah, she had to say something. I mean, she already got hit 17 times about the elephant.
And speaking of, this is cutting right to the end, but I love it that the snake shows up at the very, very end of this minute, and it's as if the snake knew that John was going to be here and just wanted to like get one last mention that while he's still good. What kind of snake am I? Look, hey.
Yeah, he sneaks in right at the edge there. It actually, my wife and I were watching it again tonight, and right past this, 3 seconds past the end of this minute, that snake gets past her neck and actually turns towards her neck. And, we don't know that snake, and most Burmese pythons are pretty calm, but it looks like it's about ready to bite her before she grabs it and tosses it. And it makes us both nervous when we're watching it.
Wow.
So
Oh, wait,
this
why
is
could she handle that snake and not the boa constrictor?
I think that's all she had to do, is they were just going to dangle it down there, and she just had to toss it. And she didn't.
Oh, okay.
I think the whole boa thing, she was supposed to handle it for some reason.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a major problem, because at some point in the interview she says, "I think I cost Spielberg, thousands of dollars by having him have to get rid of that scene and rewrite another one." And so she actually sounds like she's concerned about it. She also apparently doesn't read scripts very well, because she was truly surprised that she was going to have to handle a snake. And then after Spielberg tosses the snake idea, he says, "But you do have to do the bugs." And she said, "Wait, what bugs? I don't want to do bugs." And so the quote was, she said, "I'm not very good at reading a lot of the stage directions, so I missed all that snake stuff and missed the bug part too."
Oh, my God.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe you ought to check those notes in the margins out a little better before
Yeah,
you agree
really.
to a movie.
That's professional.
Yeah. So this is a Burmese python. It's the same kind of snake that we hear about in the news that's down in the Everglades, that people blame pet keepers for. But they are a bit of a problem. They do well in our environment, and they can be, the average size is 12 and a half feet, but the record size is like 18 and a half feet. They can get pretty large.
Whoa.
Wow.
And they do occasionally eat alligators, but alligators occasionally eat them, so it's a real battle going on in South Florida for sure.
It's like West Side Story.
Yeah, and everybody wants to blame the pet keepers, saying that once the snake got too big, they just walked out into the Everglades and dropped him off. And that may have happened on some very rare occasions, but it doesn't explain the thousands of Burmese pythons that are out there. But what does is Hurricane Andrew. So Hurricane Andrew came through. There are importers of wildlife down in South Florida, and people who had pet snakes in their homes, they were told to evacuate, so they left, and they left their snake thinking, well, it doesn't have to eat for a month, it doesn't matter, it'll be fine when I get back. But when they got back, their house wasn't there, and these things, were just basically turned loose into the wild from the storm.
Wow.
That would do it.
Yeah, that does it. So this is an animal that's found in Southeast Asia. There's actually another python called the Indian rock python that occurs all through India that would have been maybe a little more appropriate, but they're harder to get in the pet trade, and I'd say even most reptile people wouldn't know the difference on screen, so it probably was a fine substitute in this case.
Well, we didn't invite most reptile people. We got the one and only. I was thinking after this sequence, we're about 25% of the way through the movie?
God, yeah, I guess so.
Is that right? I mean, this is something we can, revisit, I guess. But can you guys imagine this movie without a love interest?
Yeah.
Would the movie work? Could you imagine the movie without a love interest at all? Like an Indiana Jones movie without a love interest here.
I don't know. That's a little bit like a Bond movie without a love interest. I'm not sure that fits.
I know what you're saying, but
I think the problem for us is we don't like this particular love interest.
Well, where are you on that, John? I mean, you were with us with Raiders and a huge Indiana Jones fan. I mean, how do you feel about Temple of Doom compared to, say, Raiders or some of the others, or Willie, or the treatment of it?
Yeah, well, certainly Raiders is by far my favorite movie, and I grew up in a Christian home, so the whole Christian background made sense to me, and so when Temple of Doom came out, I was, here's a religion I know nothing about, I couldn't relate to, and it was darker than the first movie, and so it certainly didn't sit well with me the first couple viewings. I wasn't a big fan, and Willie didn't necessarily help that. She's not somebody I dream about, for sure. So, but then there are other leading ladies in Indiana Jones books, and even a little redhead named Sophia Hapgood in one of the video games, and I'm fine with those leading ladies. They're more relatable, I guess, in my mind, for Indy.
Sure.
Yeah, it's weird that like the two of these they're so at odds the entire time, and that they're like, I don't know, it in different hands maybe this could have been a solid, they love to hate each other, and they hate, and eventually they wind up in each other's arms, even though they hate each other's guts. Like that could have worked as like a kind of classic Hollywood sort of thing, but I don't know, not quite.
I feel like in this, it was minute 34. Maybe they were trying to show us that they share something. They both have fake names.
Yeah,
right.
It's like one of the things they have in common.
That's a bond that you could.
I don't know.
They both have
I don't
fake
know.
names. They both wear a tuxedo. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna be unpopular, and I'm gonna say something nice about Willie here. For the second time in the movie, Short Round is really nasty to her. He says, "You call him Dr. Jones," again. Mm-hmm. And then the next time she addresses him, she listens and respects that, and she calls him Dr. Jones. Mm. And so, she's mindful of Short Round's feelings, even though they don't seem to have much of a relationship.
Yeah, in the novel, they're totally setting it up for them to be a family. You hear Short Round's mindset, and as they're sitting in a campsite like this, he's thinking about how nice it is that there's a mom figure and a dad figure, and how he wants this to become something for him in his future.
Oh my God, that's sad.
Yeah, I just got really sad. And meanwhile, we know he's, and his best friend is the elephant, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that kid, and Andy's not, we discussed this, Indy's not taking him to America.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not
Whole
his
thing
plans.
is-
Yeah.
Keep
It's
telling
not
yourself
horrible.
that kid.
But it is throughout the entire novel. He talks. He at least thinks that we can see in the novel that he is going to America. He's pretty sure about it.
Oh my gosh.
Really?
Saddest movie I've ever
Yeah.
seen.
This is the saddest movie.
Short Round and the Crippling Disappointment.
Short round and the best friend who never forgets.
Yeah. So when
man.
at the very end of this minute, when Willie says, when Indy says, "Where are you going? I'd sleep closer if I were you, for safety's sake," and Willie says, "Dr. Jones, I'd be safer sleeping with a snake." Did that remind anybody else of "I just as soon kiss a Wookiee"?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
It works for me.
Yep.
Yeah, put it in the page. That's a good one.
With a big Wookiee going, huh? I'll kiss her. Well, is that it for 35? Do we have anything else?
I think that's it.
That's
Yeah,
it.
I think I'm good.
Well, John, thank you so much for closing out this back half of the week with us.
Thanks
This
for
has
having me
been awesome.
back. This was great.
We should never, ever venture out into the woods or the jungle without you. We need to bring you along every time. Just so we know what's up.
I'm available for parties too.
And if people want to hire you for a party down in Florida, where can they get in touch with you?
Well, I can be found at alligatorfarm.com. And then recently I've been writing some articles for IndieMag. You can read IndieMag at indiemag.com. And I've kind of been doing articles about the animals for Indiana Jones.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, they're cool.
Yeah, they are. They're great. And Jer, where can people get in touch with us? Find out stuff about us?
I would encourage everybody to come to my favorite place, actually, is the Indiana Jones Minute Listeners Crusade, which is on Facebook. And you can join the discussion, talk about love interests and African elephants versus Indian elephants and baboons and why they're outside of Egypt. And yeah, that's what I'd say. Also, my favorite thing, 724 Lost Ark. Call us, Indiana Jones Minute Hotline, leave a message, and we may put it on the podcast.
Yeah. Let your voice be heard.
Yeah. And since it's Friday, maybe we should mention, if you haven't yet, for some reason, listened to the Star Wars Minute, the guys that inspired us to start this podcast, we highly recommend you check them out. And there's a whole kind of group of podcasts that are doing this Movies by Minute at moviesbyminutes.com.
Absolutely. There's a ton of them now. There's I don't even want to say the number because it's probably doubled by the time anybody goes to check it out.
It's exactly like this animal sequence. You're like, oh, lizard. Oh, that's not a baboon.
What's an owl doing in here?
Yeah,
Not an owl.
Oh, the owl.
Caddyshack Minute, what? But awesome. Everybody, go have a great weekend of listening to other Movies by Minutes podcasts, and then come back here on Monday for minute 36 of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom here on the Indiana Jones Minute.
Shivalinga Stones?
Oh, jeez. Stones?
Happy kids!
Come back next minute where you see a python treated horribly.
Oh, God. I'm really sad. For Friday? We're going to go into the weekend like that.